Hello, welcome along to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week, we're chatting to Fergus Craig. You might know Fergus from his viral comedy shorts, his reels. They kind of blew up a few years ago over lockdown, in which he plays a crime writer, a fairly naff crime writer, reading aloud his stories of Detective Roger le Carre. And he's got a new book out. It's called I'm Not the Only Murderer in My Retirement Home. We talk about how joke writing has influenced how he writes mysteries, the connection between comedy and crime like that. Also, you can hear more about what he knows before he starts.
You know there's going to be a murder within, the first 20% of the book. You know at the end you're going to find out who did that murder. You know that there's going to be an investigation. You know who the chief characters are. At that stage, I will know who I think is going to be the murderer, but I'm open to changing my mind as I write. I'll have a couple of big moments that I'm working towards that I know I want in the book, but again, that could change. So I have that document, but it's literally just a page, and I'll refer back to that every now and again.
And he reveals why he's pleased he doesn't have to be relentlessly funny in this novel.
I find it very freeing to not have that desperate need to make people laugh every sentence. And I still have that desperate need to entertain people. My goal is to entertain, but to have other avenues for it, to just have fun observations, fun little flourishes in the writing, fun characters and scenes. Who knows whether I'll ever write another Roger le Carre book again. It's quite amazing that I managed to get 2 books out of that style of writing, because it was quite just relentless joke.
It's all on the way with Fergus Craig in a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. Yes, welcome along to the show. My name's Dan Simpson. This is Writer's Routine. It's where we take a look inside an author's working day. We see what they do, where they do it, how do they plan their life to give them the best chance of getting words down on the page and getting that book out there. Now, you can go behind the scenes of this show, really, by following along on our Substack page. You get a more or less weekly newsletter, just thoughts, maybe things that I want to expand on following the episodes, little recommendations as well. I always have fun putting them together for you, and you can subscribe. They're absolutely free. You won't miss one. You can find the link for our Substack newsletter in the episode notes. Now, this week we are chatting to Fergus Craig. And yeah, Fergus is a writer, stand-up comic, an actor. He's appeared across the BBC and radio, also on Disney Plus. And as a stand-up, he was Hackney Empire's New Act of the Year in 2009. Popped up here and there over the telly, and then found fame during lockdown, really, with short parody videos where he played quite a cliched crime writer, middle-aged, quite posh, reading his stories of Detective Roger le Carre. And naturally, when you find some success parodying bad crime writing, you're then asked to write some hopefully good stuff of your own. He published Once Upon a Crime and Murder at Crime Manor, bringing Detective Roger le Carre to life. He explains why that was so tricky, writing a crime story where people are really there for humour, along with the plot and character. It needs to be stuffed full of jokes. Now, his new novel is still funny, but just not focused on only being funny. It's called I'm Not the Only Murderer in My Retirement Home. It tells the story of a serial killer, Carol Quinn, who's out of prison and looking to relax in her retirement home, hoping that her past won't come to light. But then when a dead body is found and her true identity is leaked, she needs to find the culprit before all eyes turn on her. That's a great hook. It's a brilliant blurb, a fantastic tease of a story, I think. We talk about working on the mystery, why plotting and planning is a bit like a game of snooker and maybe the hardest sporting feat imaginable. So it's all to come with Fergus Craig, and we start as we always do with what he sees around him in the place where he sits down to write.
I'll describe for you where I usually write. It can vary, but most often I'll work in our sort of living room come dining room come kitchen, open plan downstairs. and I sit at our dining room table. Behind me, there is a fish tank. There are large bookshelves. On the dining room table, there might be a pile of Beanos that my son has been reading. There might be detritus from breakfast. There might be Lego. It's very chaotic, really. And then my book will be, my laptop will be perched on a pile of books. And I've recently started using a wireless keyboard separate to that. It's very sort of haphazard, my writing setup. I know I've heard people talk about very sort of like spaces that are tailored towards creativity or whatever. Mine is just somewhere to sit while I write.
You've written all sorts for a little while, but you're 3 novels down now. Do you envision your space, I guess, becoming a bit more professional? Like, are you growing into the nature and the rhythm and the space of being a published novelist now?
I don't know. That would be interesting. That just that'll be, how my life evolves, really. I suppose in an ideal situation, I'd have a lovely office. And I remember hearing Ian Rankin once talk about how he sort of finishes his books at his place on the west coast of Scotland. And, that would be nice to have a place to go away and finish. But I think no matter how, where my life takes me, if I live in central London, so and I have a family, so my space is sort of restricted by what is possible within those parameters. But even if I was to suddenly start selling hundreds of millions of books and have limitless funds, I'm sure I'd have an office, but I'd imagine it wouldn't be I'd imagine it'd be quite chaotic. Do you know what I mean? I think that's my natural state.
Well, so what do you need around you to write? Like, what have you learned over these last few years that actually, like, it is quite important that it is there? I mean, you've recently made the big switch to have a wireless keyboard and have your laptop propped up. Now, that's a big move.
That is a big move. Yeah, what triggered that was just noticing that my wrists were really hurting. And I thought, I'm probably not sitting in a very healthy place here, and I have a lot of work to do, and I don't want my work to be physically painful. So this is my solution to that. So it's just finding solutions as I go. But it's very just sort of get down and write. I mean, I wrote one of those novels just sat on the couch because that was comfortable and I wasn't having a problem with it. I was just sat on the couch. But what I'll often do, well, not that often, but, once every week or two, when writing's sort of becoming a slog, you're not enjoying it, what I might do is turn it into a treat. So I might go to there's a coffee place near me that does really nice rocky road that's probably about 4,000 calories. And I will go there and have a coffee and eat some rocky road and bang out a few hundred words. And then what I might do is I might treat myself to doing the last hour of the day in a pub with a pint. And then I find like if I'm turning it into, because I write because I enjoy it, that's what led me to this. And sometimes it starts to feel too much like work. And sometimes I think turning it into an activity where I am having fun reminds me that I'm just having a nice time in a pub, having a pint. And then it turns it into a fun activity.
If you're in a pub having a pint, what is the pint of choice that helps the writing?
Oh, that's a good question. Just a pint of Pernod. No. Sometimes a Guinness, sometimes a real ale, sometimes a non-alcoholic pint. I find the maximum is 2, and by the time you've got to the end of your second pint, you haven't felt the effects of 2 pints yet, have you? So it's more of a psychological thing. It's like it's not that the alcohol is doing anything, because by the time the alcohol is in your system, you're probably not working at optimum levels. It's more that it's just a little trigger to be, oh, now I'm having fun. Let's have fun in the writing. So, yeah, that's the sort of mind trick I'm playing on myself. Of course, you can't do that every day because that's not a sustainable lifestyle. Although sort of Hunter S. Thompson made it work for himself, but I've chosen not to do that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not sure Hunter S. Thompson is the ultimate kind of person to compare yourself to longevity, really. It depends if it's Pernod or not. So, like, I know that you listen to the show and that there is thoughts there about, okay, how can I make this more enjoyable for myself again? But so you are thinking about like the process, but you're not really concerning yourself with like where and when you write. So what do you think about? And we'll come to the routine in a second, but what do you think about on how you can improve as a writer and improve the way that you do it?
I think it's just all about getting myself into a headspace. It'll depend on what I'm writing. Traditionally, I was a comedy writer for years. I still am. And I always found it easier. I never struggled generally to write what I thought was funny dialogue. Whether everyone agreed with that is something else. It's all a matter of taste. But I always found it relatively easy to come up with funny stuff or funny characters. What I struggle with for decades is plot and turning that into something that's grown up. So that's where the work comes in for me. So I'm trying to get myself into a headspace where I'm thinking about the thing as a whole and where I'm going. But now, for example, on the project that I'm working on now, I sometimes wonder, have I swung too far the other way? So I'll find myself writing in the document, be playful, just little notes to myself to remind myself to have fun as well and be playful with it. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely does. Now, just bringing you back to the dining table come living room space where you're writing, talk us through the technicals of it. So there's not that much around you that pertains to your story. So where does all the plotting, all the notes, all the mind mapping, where does that exist?
Yeah, there's no there's no list of post-it notes. There's no board up. What I didn't mention in my space is I always have music on these days. I didn't mention that, by the way. That's a key part of it.
These days?
Yeah, when I say these days, I probably mean the last 3 or 4 years. I never used to write with music. But the last few years, I've listened almost exclusively to one band called The War on Drugs. Just about 4 albums, just the same music all day, every day as I write. I don't know why, but it's just become just a real big part of how I write. So I suppose that's a big part that I didn't mention of me getting into that space.
But it being kind of one band, and there's probably no meaning to it. Like, it's probably just something that you did one time and it went quite well, so you continue to do it? Like, what do you remember about the switch?
I think it's their music. I used to listen to it sometimes to go to sleep. I like it a lot, but it's quite non-intrusive, even though I know a lot of people can't listen to things with lyrics, and I would generally agree. They do have lyrics, but I must have listened to every one of their songs thousands and thousands of times, but I don't know what the lyrics are because they just wash over me. I just find it atmospheric. I find it has a sort of like steady rhythm to it that suits my creative brain. I can't articulate why, but it works for me. And I have found recently on this latest project, I was like, can I do another year of listening to the same 4 or 5 albums? Is this... So I've started to mix in some Aphex Twin. I'm experimenting with different artists.
Oh, wouldn't it be absolutely awful if it turns out you couldn't write with any other artist. If it was just like this, you've settled yourself in for those same 4 albums for your life now.
I could really do with them bringing out some new music. It was a big thing for me last year. I discovered that they had a load of live albums. So I've used them. I've added them to the rotation. But yeah, sorry, your actual question was about how I'm plotting, how I'm...
Well, yeah, there's no post-it notes, there's no big board around you. So where does all of that sit?
So I generally, when I'm working on a book, I will start with about a page of plot that I will discuss with my editor before I start the manuscript. But it's literally a page, and I only really write. So far, I generally write mysteries, and although they can be quite subversive and different, they still follow that sort of traditional mystery formula. So there's going to be a murder within, sort of, I don't know, the first 20% of the book. At the end, you're going to find out who did that murder. You know that there's going to be an investigation. You know who the chief characters are. At that stage, I will know who I think is going to be the murderer, but I'm open to changing my mind as I write. I'll have a couple of big moments that I'm working towards that I know I want in the book, but again, that could change. So I have that document, but it's literally just a page, and I'll refer back to that every now and again. And as I write the book, on the document that I'm writing it in, I might just make some notes at the bottom about ideas of where I want to go. But it's very... there's the people at school who took loads of notes and everything was very organized. I'm not one of those people. It's quite cash.
When you're working on that with the editor, because I think a lot of people listening maybe won't be at that point. They'll be kind of working on their first novel by themselves without anyone else seeing it. So what's your editor doing just for that first one sheet of an idea? Are they providing anything? Is it just a nice soundboard?
It depends. I mean, mine have been quite collaborative. I mean, for example, the one that I'm currently promoting, the book that comes out next week at the time that we're recording, that was my editor had quite a big role to play in the initial idea. We were just talking about cozy crime and whether there was a fun spin to be had on that, and he sort of suggested throwing a serial killer into the mix. So that was very collaborative just on that initial idea. And yeah, then we had a good conversation about what I really wanted to almost get his okay on before we started. Just make sure that we were clear on what the tone was going to be. I didn't want to write. I don't tend to send stuff as I'm writing. I write the whole thing and then send it off. But what I was terrified of doing was writing a whole book and then him getting it and saying, this is not what I was expecting and not what I wanted. So I just want to be very clear on, are we agreed on what the tone is here? And yeah, so we'll have a chat about that. But I then as long as I feel confident with that, I feel free to go off in my own directions,
Just very quickly back to the writing setup. We get quite nerdy. You mentioned the document. What software are you using? Have you got a preferred font?
I use Pages, and I never hear anyone use Pages, which is obviously that's the doc that just the program that just comes free with your Mac if you've got that. And I don't understand why other people don't use it. Once I send it to the editor, then he'll send it back in Word, and then I'm working in Word. But I just use Pages, and I'm just looking at it now. I use Times New Roman, I think. And I use double space, and I use 12 point. That's the size. That was a big thing. That was a big thing for me years ago when I used to fiddle around and write before I was getting books published. I just used to write in sort of Arial, no double spacing. And I think it was a big psychological leap then I moved to Courier and I moved to double spacing. And then it just started to look a bit more like a book. And that was a big psychological leap.
I had a conversation with an author only earlier today who was venting for quite a while about how much she loathed pages. I don't know what it is. Like, I dip in and out. Like, it's my kind of jobbing, getting stuff down software. So I don't know why there's such vehement hatred.
I've got zero. I will just use whatever is in front of me. Like, as you hear me describe my writing setup, I have zero understanding of why people really care about what programs they use. And you hear people talk about Scrivener and stuff. I've got no idea. I'm like, aren't we just writing words here? And like, if this program allows me to write words, then what else could you possibly want? I don't understand. I get up about 7:45. And then my job is to get my son ready to school. I will take my son to school. I'll get back just after 9, and then I will have a cup of tea or coffee, and I will sit on the sofa, look at emails, piss about a bit, have some breakfast, then I might move on to word games, the New York Times word games. I'll do my Wordle, I'll do my spelling bee. And I guess I'm telling myself that I'm moving into a sort of creative space. I'm warming up my mind, but what I'm probably doing is just procrastinating. Then I will move. I mean, if I'm not there by 10:30, then the self-hatred is sort of kicking in. But then I will, ideally, well before 10:30, I will have made my way over to that table. I'll have my setup, and I'll have a look at what I wrote. Or maybe while I'm still on the sofa, I'll have a look at what I wrote the day before, and I'll fiddle around with that. And I might have left myself a little note about where I want to start today. And then I will write for however long I'm having fun, however long. And even if I'm not having fun, then I will write until I am having fun, until I'm making headway. I'll write for an hour or two. And then I haven't had a shower yet on a normal day. So then I will get in the shower. And the shower is quite a good space because I'm not listening to anything else, and you can't look at your phone when you're in the shower or anything like that. So I might think about plot. I might think about where I am in the thing that I'm writing. Then I'll go down, maybe write a little bit more before lunch, have my lunch, and then I'll do another hour or two. Then these are the sort of habits that I'm trying to get out of. But I feel like, if I'm honest with myself, for the last few years, a lot of my writing has been fueled by caffeine and sugar. So in that post-lunch slump, if I'm really struggling, I might run to the corner shop, buy a Dr. Pepper and a Twix, something like that, bash out as many words as I can, and then go and pick up my son from school. Sometimes I'll have an after-school club. Well, often he does, so then I'll be picking him up about 4:30. Then I'm cooking dinner and everything, and I might be thinking about what I wrote that day. And then in the evening, I might be watching telly with my girlfriend, watching reality shows or whatever. If it's something that doesn't require a great deal of attention, I'll often feel very... writing for me is a lot of self-doubt constantly about, is what I'm writing shit? So I will often go back and read what I've been writing to figure out if I like it or not, and I might just sort of fiddle around with the odd sentence while we're watching telly.
Just that very quickly, that self-doubt, that idea of is this absolute dross? 3 books in now, is there any? Have you noticed any sign of it, like abating? Are you any better at dealing with it?
Of that self-doubt abating? I wonder if it's getting worse. I don't know. There's that level of, because the goalposts move all the time, don't they? So there was 10 years or so ago, or whatever. I mean, I was moving from writing TV and everything. But there was that sort of doubt of, am I a writer? Could this possibly be published? And then things start to get published. So you have that validation. But now I'm sort of, either the next thing I'm writing is more ambitious, or there's that fear that, oh, well, I wrote those things that did work, but have I completely lost it? Is this not good anymore? Am I boring myself? I think like anything for me creatively, it's a balance between the absolute arrogance to believe that anyone would want to read what I'm writing or listen to me or anything, or to stand on a stage because I've been an actor and all of that. There's a real arrogance about that. And then there's a real self-doubt of like, why would anyone want to read this? So I think it's helpful to have that, to keep an eye on yourself, but it's also quite sort of emotionally taxing.
The day feels, like quite busy, but a bit scattergun in that, well, it's a couple of hours here and then, I'll have a shower, then I'll do a bit there and then I'll be watching telly and I might get a bit away there. What's the general aim for the day? What are you happy with having done when you call it a day?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of word count, my general rule is if I've done 2,000 or more, then I feel very smug. I've been a very good boy. Well done. If I've done less than 1,000, unless I've made, and this is on a day where I've had, because I do lots of other things, but if I've had a full day to write on my book, if I've done less than 1,000, unless I've made some huge plot breakthrough, then then I sort of hate myself if I've done less than 1,000. So 1,000 is the sort of, that's the minimum in terms of word count for me. Yeah.
And you mentioned doing a lot of other things. How good are you now, a few years into both novel writing and everything else, at like being able to dip in a one, move to another? Are you someone that separates it by day? Like how do you deal with that balance?
Okay, I think that because having a kid and the sort of life circumstances that I'm in, and those sort of like hours of the day where he's at work and also he's at school, and my girlfriend is upstairs. Ever since COVID, she's been working from home in a real job. I think that is very disciplining for me. I think for years when when I didn't have a kid and she used to go to work out at the office, I could easily slip into a lot of sort of procrastination and just sort of thinking, oh, I'm a creative person and I can't, no, the feelings aren't right now. I can't do this.
But the thing is with that, Fergus, is I doubt your girlfriend's busy at work through the day. She's not looking over your shoulder, like in making sure that you're working. It's just the simple fact that she's in the flat. Yeah,
it is. Because just the fact that I know that she's hard at work, and I know she might pop downstairs. Just the idea that she would see me like lying on the couch watching cricket, that wouldn't be great. So it's not that she's a great big enforcer, but it's quite a helpful thing to have there. Do you know what I mean? And the fact that I'm an adult with a son and he's at school and we have a mortgage, it feels like that day I just have to get all this stuff done. So the other stuff I might have to do would be stuff like this that I'm doing with you right now, or it might be because I still act, I might have to make a self-tape or something like that. And I just have to, everything I've got to get done, I've got to get done before I pick up my son. So, yeah, I think I just get through it.
Now, I don't want to like reduce like your career, right? Because you've done so much, you've done acting and a lot of TV writing, but I think you came to like a lot of people's, screens, phone screens and stuff like during lockdown. You had some success doing videos through then. Am I right?
You are, yeah. Yeah, I mean, my career's sort of gone in phases, but that seems to be the thing that's made the biggest impact on people seeing my face.
So I asked this because I'd like to talk about kind of the first book of this ilk in just a second. But what's it like when you're, you know, toiling away behind the scenes and you are picking up work as an actor and you're writing TV comedy and then to suddenly be launched to some success like that almost instantly at a really weird point when everyone's locked inside and some people are having a really bad time through lockdown. It's like how do you deal with that moment where it suddenly happens?
Well, it's funny because in one sense, yes, you could say I was launched and all of that. You know, for anyone who's not familiar, basically I did this character at home, this guy who's the sort of middle-class dad who sent messages to his son on his laptop. And during lockdown, it sort of took off, particularly on Twitter. And, but, you know, it was very validating to be able to be creative. I was really fortunate that my son was having these because he wasn't at school or nursery, he was having these really long, like 3-4 hour naps in the middle of the day. So I was able to use that time to make a video. And then, yeah, getting that response from people was really nice. But I didn't feel as if I was launched. Like with everything with me, it's sort of attached to anxiety. It's sort of like, well, how am I going to sustain this? How am I going to make this work? Because it's not like you suddenly get loads of views on Twitter and now that you automatically have an income because of that. so for me, it was like, oh, this is great. How can I turn this into something that goes somewhere? And it did. I ended up with a pilot on the BBC that ultimately didn't work out. It got very nice reviews. I got told I had a series. It didn't happen. Fine. But it was a very odd path to becoming a novelist because that character that I did, just one day I thought, oh, well, because he was like this middle-class dad who was very self-important. I thought it'd be quite funny if he'd left his job and decided to become a crime writer. And he just mentioned that in one of his videos. And then one day I thought, oh, it would be fun to read an extract from his book that he's writing. And I wrote this extract and I read it out. And it was very, I mean, people call it a parody, and I suppose it's a parody, but it was not like I was parodying real crime writers. I was parodying this idea of what would a terrible crime novel written by this middle-class dad be like. And I started doing videos of those extracts and they sort of took off a bit online. And then oddly, that amounted to a book deal. So I'd imagine a lot of writers listening to this would find that annoying because that's quite a fluky route to being a published author. But I promise I had put the legwork in trying to be a writer for 20 years.
Yeah, it's it's kind of like the old overnight sensation that took like 10 years, right? So that's the phrase. But it's interesting in that when you land the book deal because of your like quote parody novel, your parody stuff that you were doing, and they want more of it, you've then got to move what was a 3-minute video out into 300 pages, which there's a bit of a tail wagging the dog about that. What were you thinking when you realised you would need to write a novel in a certain style that was almost bad as well as being good?
Yeah, there was that fear. I had the fear, is this a sustainable joke? Can I keep that audience engaged for a whole book? And I think it's fair to say it's a matter of taste, right? What I did. There are, I'm sure, plenty of people who would have found that, because those books, I wrote 2 of them as this, about this character, Detective Roger le Carre, this detective in Exeter. And I sort of wrote it in this sort of hard-boiled style, this kind of what if The Wire was set in Exeter is the way I saw it. And almost every sentence was a joke. So it's a matter of taste, but what was tricky was I was trying to write badly, but also well enough that it was readable, and I was trying to write, but what I found was there were a lot of paths to being funny. There were some really labored metaphor, or some really overly descriptive way of describing the room that he was in, or I would often quite like, if he was to reference the Second World War, then I would just go on Wikipedia and list a load of facts about the Second World War because that's like a terrible piece of writing, but you could make that funny. There are a lot of different routes I found to being funny.
Back with more from Fergus in just a second. Very quickly, I want to talk about something that I've been, thinking through for a little while now. You might remember this time last year on the show, actually, the podcast was sponsored by an AI transcription company. And I thought that was a good idea. And I was absolutely wrong all about that. At the time, I didn't really appreciate the work that goes into it and the art and the craft of transcription. And I got so many brilliant emails from listeners, from you, wanting a discussion about why that was happening. And I was really educated about the work that went into it. And, over the last 12 months or so, as the world changes and we are constantly told that AI is going to make the world bigger, and you can think what you'd like about this, but I think it might end up making the world much smaller. And authenticity and simple humanity is more important than ever. So it's really made me reflect on how wrong I got it last year. So I made a decision to never accept sponsorship from AI software ever again. Now, I will say I don't control all of the ads on this show. There are ones peppered throughout that I have no say over. And indeed, quite often I don't know what they are because it depends when, where, and how you're listening. But for the products that you hear me read, sponsorships where I have been directly communicating to a brand, I will never accept anything too closely connected with the art of storytelling and artificial intelligence. And I say that because I recently turned down some money from a new AI software. And I thought about it, because it isn't black and white. There are grey areas in here. But it didn't quite align with how I think writing should be done. And what we're here as humans to do and to create. So they won't be supporting the show. I thought I'd let you know that. And also to mention that if you would like to support the show, there are many ways that you can do that. You can do that on our Patreon page and on Ko-Fi as well to become a monthly backer to help this show carry on. And I can bring you these episodes as often as I can with some of the best human writers around. You can make that happen over on our Patreon page. For just a few dollars a month, it gets you merch, it gets you bonus content. There is even a way for your book to sponsor the show on there too. You can make it a one-off, one and done. That's absolutely fine. You can get involved with our Ko-Fi page too. Links for both of those, all the ways that you can help us out. And there are quite a few now over on the episode notes, wherever you're listening. Let's get back to it then with Fergus Craig discussing his new novel, I'm Not the Only Murderer in My Retirement Home. In this part, we talk more about keeping it funny and what makes someone laugh, and how learning from joke writing mirrors the mechanics of crime writing to a degree. And we get back to it talking about the new novel. We've heard how it came about through a chat with his editor. How did that become enough of an idea for him to then write about?
It was just that idea of, could you take a cozy crime setting, a typical one like a retirement home, and could you throw in a serial killer? The basic premise of the book is that Carol Quinn, she's 75 years old. She's been in prison for 35 years. She's a retired serial killer. She goes straight from prison to a luxury retirement home in Hampstead. Early on in the book, someone is murdered. Of course, everyone thinks that she committed the murder. Now she has to find out who the real murderer is so that she can clear her name. And what makes that more difficult for her is that everyone in the retirement home is a retired investigator of sorts. So it's a heightened sort of situation, but it was despite being silly and fun, it was a departure from the previous books, because this time I'm not trying to write badly. I'm trying to write well. And although there's still way more jokes than your average book, not every chapter has a joke. I feel like the characters, although they are heightened, I'm trying to create sort of real characters who you can empathize with, and that. So it was a bit different.
How difficult was it for you to kind of switch into that, like being a bit more serious over the course of 300 pages when you've not really done that for 2 whole novels? It's and also writing in a slightly different genre. That's a little tweak for you.
Yeah, I found it enormously freeing when I started. I immediately loved it. It doesn't mean that there weren't massive dips in the process where I went through all that self-doubt. I found it very freeing to not have that desperate need to make people laugh every sentence. And I still have that desperate need to entertain people. I'm not trying to be Proust here. My goal is to entertain, but to have other avenues for it, to just have fun observations, fun little flourishes in the writing, fun characters and scenes. I found it, I think, who knows whether I'll never write another Roger le Carre book again, but I think that 2 it's quite amazing that I managed to get 2 books out of that style of writing, because it was quite just relentless joke. And this was more sort of, I found it a lot of fun.
When I was thinking about the new novel, and you're not the first person with the following to dabble in cozy crime, and I was going to say, well, like, what are you doing to make it different? How are you finding a novel angle into this? But it was kind of already in there, right? With a serial killer actually having to find the serial killer.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the premise itself, I mean, it's in an area that is very recognizable, but at the same time, I'd like to think that the premise itself shows that it's a bit different. There was an American review that described it as a cracked cozy, and I liked that. I like to think that it's its own thing, and I wanted it to be very much me and what I wanted to write, as opposed to me trying to do, what sells, what is the cozy, how do I become a cozy crime writer? I wanted to do something that I genuinely thought was entertaining.
You mentioned the one sheet that you work on with your editor. That's all you need before you start. What needs to be on that one page?
Just the sort of the setup, the list of sort of suspects, Although, again, I look back at those old pages and those suspects could really change. The basic outline of how the murder happens and how it's solved, although, again, that might change a lot. And who did it. And there might be a couple of suggestions of funny moments that could occur. There's not a great deal. I see it as I'm writing, I don't know if you're a fan of snooker at all, Dan.
I'm a fan of the idea and the tradition of snooker rather than the actual game.
Sure, that's fine. But perhaps you'll be familiar if I say, if I was a professional snooker player and my goal was to make a total clearance, do you know what I mean? To do
a 147, one of the trickiest feats in sport, I would say.
Yeah. So let's call, and I sort of was thinking about this as I was writing the other day. So a book, let's say the book is the 147, and you know what your goal is. You're going to end on potting the final black. And if you're a professional snooker player, you might think ahead 2 or 3 shots, maybe 4 or 5. But you don't know how every shot is going to go in that break. So that's sort of the way I write. I might think 2 or 3 chapters ahead. But I also might think, if I'm a snooker player, at some point I'm going to have to go into the pack. So I know that's coming. Have to go into the pack. I might think, oh, that red is on the cushion. That's going to be a problem later on. So I need to have that in mind. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, and I have done 400 episodes, and that's the first time that little metaphor has come up. So I really, I'm all over it. I love that.
It's a good one, isn't it? It works for me. That's the way I think I do it.
I do. So you could be a player like Ronnie O'Sullivan who sees all the patterns, sees the lines and the angles, but sometimes you need to be prepared that, your opponent will be as good, things will go wrong. How are you going to get yourself out of this snooker?
Yeah, I mean, John Grisham, he sort of planned, and a lot of writers, I know they plan every chapter before they start, but you can't do that with snooker. So I'm playing snooker.
Let's talk about the making it funny. So I was hearing someone on a thing, which is so vague. I just can't remember. It was on my social feed, talking about how to write a joke. Right now, I mean, in itself, this could go on for hours and hours, like finding the intricacies of that. But I was hearing all about shaving seconds off, finishing on the funny word, like hearing the beats when you are peppering a story and your prose full of jokes. How are you making sure each of them are right and are valid and earn their place? What are you doing to help those out?
That's a good question. I don't know. What am I doing?
Are you reading them aloud?
When I was writing the Roger le Carre books, because I knew I was going to be reading the audiobook, I was reading chapters back to myself out loud. Yeah, and
I guess what rules are you thinking of to making each individual lines funny that maybe you would use to write jokes, standard jokes?
I'm just trying to have a variety. What rules? Do you know what? This is going to sound... I always find analysing comedy really difficult, actual funny. I find it really difficult. And again, it's a real matter of taste. A lot of people will listen to what I do and not think it's funny, and some people will. But funny stuff, I've always that's come quite naturally to me, and that's and like I said, that's totally a matter of taste whether you find me funny. But that stuff has never really been my problem. It's more like when you're writing a book, is can I just not become painful to listen to because I'm just going on and on and on with the same jokes. So to have some variety in it and to make that plot engaging enough. The big things that I have to ram into my head are things that I will write. which is funnily enough things that I got from people who were teaching people how to write sitcoms. There was, I don't know who it was. It might have been Dan Harmon, the American scriptwriter. His sort of 4 words, and I might have even misremembered it, but he would say for writing a sitcom script would be motivation, stakes, twists, and escalation. And that really resonated with me. So I will write that all over my document in big, bold, capital letters. Motivation is really handy to be thinking about that all the time. Where is this scene going? What is motivating the characters in it? Stakes. I think that's why I really enjoy writing crime, because I think it really helps me, because I'm someone who struggles with plot, and stakes are just inherently there in crime, but it doesn't mean you can't like just always be up in the stakes. You know, somebody has to solve this crime, but why is it really, really important that they solve this crime? We know what will happen to them if they fail to solve this crime. Twists, because twists are fun, aren't they? Although you don't want to make that too sort of artificial. And then escalation, just sort of like towards the end of the book. So I know I'm not answering your question about comedy. I'm just like sidestepping it because I just don't know how to answer it.
Well, how about, how do you think, having written comedy, how did that affect and perhaps help how you write mysteries? You know, getting the beats, getting the timing right, maybe a bit of misdirection, that must be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's all instinctively there. And I think that really helped. And I think, and I want to give the impression that I think I was just born a funny person and I never had anything to learn. I think by doing comedy for such a long time, I think you do learn about economy in your writing and about getting to the point. And I think I'm not some florid writer. I'm not, although I love people like John Steinbeck or whatever, I am never going to elegantly describe the prairie for 3 pages. You know, I did live comedy for many years, and then you are just constantly terrified that people are going to stop laughing. So when I'm writing, I'm constantly terrified that people are going to get bored. So I'll often be writing and thinking, oh, this is just dull. And then you forget that, oh, well, what's taken me an hour to write? And then you read back over it and you go, well, that's only 2 paragraphs. I had this hilarious moment like 3 minutes ago as someone's going to read it. But I mean, I'm not a lot of, you know, the reviews and editors and things, people who bought this book from other countries have said about this book that's just come out, oh, it's really fast paced. And that really surprised me because it didn't feel fast paced to me as I was writing it. But then you forget, well, obviously it's not going to be fast paced while you're writing it because it takes months to write. But I think coming from a comedy background, you have that sort of anxiety that people are not being entertained. So
thinking about your Carol Quinn, so the serial killer, you're writing her after writing 2 books with Detective Roger le Carre, who, and his nature is that he is like an element of a parody. Whereas I guess Carol probably needs to be a bit more authentic, and she's also a woman. So, what did you do to tap into that characterization? How was that different?
Well, initially I thought, well, I knew I was going to be writing about a serial killer, and they were going to be my main protagonist. And I thought, well, I should watch some serial killer documentaries on Netflix and what have you, and read up on serial killers. And very quickly you're sort of reminded that serial killers are horrible people. And the world of the serial killer, it won't surprise you, is very, very dark. So I immediately sort of then gave myself permission to go, well, this is a heightened world. I'm not aiming here to write a a warts and all realistic portrayal of a serial killer who might exist in the world. We're having a little bit of fun here, and I think all cozy crime is a little bit of fun. Murder is horrible, and yet for some reason people find it a really enjoyable, relaxing genre if it's written in a certain way, because I think we all know it's a game, and we're not really talking about murder, we're playing a game here. So then I knew it had to be a woman, because then that helps you. I wanted it to be a likable serial killer, so it's going to be a woman, because then that helps you get one step away from real serial killers. And she had to. I knew I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the crimes that she'd done. So, although she had to kill people that, as a reader, you might go, well, I might not have killed that person, but I can see why they deserved it. So I wanted to make her sort of darkly funny, someone we could get alongside with, a serial killer that we might want to be our friend somehow.
I speak to a lot of authors who they find the element of social media a little bit tricky, and it's so vital now. I mean, the responsibility of marketing has never been more heavily on the actual shoulders of the writer. Whereas you've kind of come into this almost on the back of like social media success. How are you finding that pressure?
I do actually find it tricky, because I have, as you say, for a few years now, I'm not one of the great big behemoths on social media, but I have developed a following doing comedy online. And now in recent months, I'm sort of saying, oh, now I'm going to try and sell you something. So that is a tricky thing to do. And you do notice a drop-off in engagement because people are aware that they are being sold something. So it is tricky. But I guess I think you just have to. I mean, what else are you going to do? Do you know what I mean? I'm more than halfway till death now. I'm writing these books. You have to sort of be your own biggest champion, really. Like, what else are you going to do? So in a way that, I might have found someone interminable online who's, sharing positive reviews and all that. I might have found that agonizing years ago and judged them for it. But now that I'm in there, you just have to do it, because, like you say, who else is going to do it for you? You just have to get over that. And it is tricky when, like, if you look on TikTok and stuff, there's a template for authors who seem to do well online, and they create this very, there's a lot of like young women who are in very attractive settings, very much romanticizing being published authors. And I think that is all authentic to them. But I am a man in his mid-40s with a family who's a bit pudgy, and I don't think like me filming myself twirling around in a circle hugging my book with some candles around me, I don't think that's going to go down so well. So I just have to bite the bullet and do it the way that I feel works for me.
And that's it for this week's episode of Writer's Routine. Thank you so much to Fergus Craig for coming on the show. The new novel, I'm Not the Only Murderer in My Retirement Home, it's out. You can get a copy. Use the link in the episode notes wherever you're listening. That way it helps out your local independent bookshop and this show as well. Now, you can support the show, you can help us carry on by becoming a backer, joining our communities over on Patreon and Ko-Fi, just a few dollars a month. It really helps us out. Again, links wherever you're listening. Also there, you'll see a way to subscribe to our more or less weekly Substack newsletter, and you can always get in touch with the show. Use the contact page over at writersroutine.com. And thank you for listening. I will see you next week with a brand new guest on the podcast. Until then, have a good one. This week's episode of Writer's Routine is sponsored by Minding Toby, the new novel by M.M. Roadheaver. If you know a child who needs an inspiring new story to capture their imagination, Minding Toby is perfect. Margaret Roadheaver writes fantastic stories, ones that get right to the heart of human thought and experience. She finds the magic in the everyday. Her new book is inspired by the wonderful dogs that she's had over the years, and what it really means to grow up. Minding Toby is all about Ember, who had one job, minding Toby. Only now, well, he's gone. Life hasn't been great for Ember. Her mum barely notices her, her dad's visits are awkward, her school is a daily battle with the tiresome bully, her big sister's just left home for college. It's just pet-sitting Toby, the sweet dog next door. It's the only part of Ember's life that feels simple and safe. And when Toby goes missing, Ember must search and find him, and along the way uncovers family secrets, new friends, and even her own place in a changing world. Now, M.M. Roadheaver has written so many different books for different audiences and really understands how to write stories which connect, which is why I think her novels for children work so well. They find the magic in the everyday, they get right to the heart of the world and our place in it. Now, Minding Toby is a mid-grade story, so it's perfect for kids who are between 9 and 11, just starting to question who they are, what might be happening. If you know a child there who needs a new story, something to inspire them and help them understand just a little bit more of the world, you need to take a look at the new novel by M.M. Roadheaver. It's called Minding Toby. It's sponsoring the show this week, and you can find out more in the episode notes wherever you're listening.